There is a moment in every person's life when the world feels quiet. Too quiet. You sit there, staring at your hands, at the screen, or maybe at the floor. And in that silence, one thought comes and sits beside you. I made a mistake. My name is Ava, and welcome to Fluent English Journey. Today, I want to tell you a story, not just about English, but about falling, breaking, and learning how to stand again. Because maybe right now you feel stuck. Maybe you said the wrong word in class. Maybe you failed a test. Maybe you tried to speak English and people laughed. Or maybe you made a mistake that changed your life in a way you didn't expect. Whatever it is, this story is for you. I still remember my own moment of the fall. It was years ago on a cold evening in London. I had just finished an important English presentation. I thought I did well until my teacher smiled kindly and said, "Your message was good, but your English was confusing." My heart dropped. That one sentence felt like a stone thrown into my chest. Confusing? I repeated, trying to smile. "Yes," she said softly, "you mixed your tenses, your pronunciation was unclear, and your ideas were hard to follow." I nodded, pretending I understood. But inside, I felt small, smaller than my voice. That night, when I got home, I opened my notebook and looked at the red marks covering my words. Every circle, every underline, felt like a message, "You're not good enough." I wanted to quit. Have you ever felt that? That moment when you just want to close your book and say, "Maybe I'm not meant for this." In English, we often use the phrase to give up. It means to stop trying, to stop fighting. But in that moment, I learned something deeper. Giving up doesn't always happen with a loud cry. Sometimes it happens quietly in your heart when you stop believing in yourself. That night, I sat in silence. No music. No phone. No words. Only that sentence echoing in my mind, "Your English was confusing." The funny thing about mistakes is that they don't just happen in our actions. They happen in our thoughts too. We start believing things that are not true. We start thinking, "I'm not smart enough. I'm not confident enough. I'll never speak like a native." And those thoughts, they build a wall. A wall that separates who you are now from who you could become. I closed my notebook, turned off the light, and whispered to myself, "I'm done." That was the fall. Days passed. I avoided English conversations. I walked away from people who spoke fluently. I told myself I needed a break. But the truth was I was afraid. Fear has a quiet voice. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It tells you to stay comfortable, to stay small, to stay silent. Sometimes I think about that time and wonder, what if I had listened to that whisper forever? What if I had stayed afraid? What if I had let that one mistake define who I was? It's strange how one sentence can change the direction of your life. Just one. And in English, words matter. A single word can lift you up or pull you down. That's why I always tell my students, be careful with the words you use to describe yourself. Because those words can become your world. That night, I called myself a failure. And when I woke up the next morning, I carried that word with me to the classroom, to the bus, to the mirror. I didn't see a learner anymore. I saw a mistake. But mistakes are strange creatures. They follow you, but they also teach you. They sting, but they also whisper the truth that you're growing. I didn't know it then. I only felt lost. One evening, a few weeks later, I was walking through the city. It was raining. The kind of soft, slow rain that makes everything feel like a movie scene. People rushed past me with umbrellas and tired faces. And I just stood there, watching the light from the street lamps dance on the wet pavement. In my head, I replayed my teacher's words again. "Your message was good, but your English was confusing." This time, something felt different. For the first time, I focused on the first part of that sentence. Your message was good. Not bad. Good. There was something good in it. I realized then my teacher wasn't trying to break me. She was trying to help me see the space between what I wanted to say and what I actually said. That space, that distance, that's where growth happens. That's where learning begins. In English, we call this moment a turning point. It means the moment when things begin to change direction, when the story starts to rise again. Standing in that rain, I didn't know where my story would go. But I knew one thing: I couldn't stay down forever. Because deep down, there was still a small voice saying, try again. And that's where this journey really began. Not when I spoke perfectly. Not when I learned grammar rules. But when I stood up after falling. Every English learner falls. Every speaker forgets a word. Every dreamer feels lost. But the ones who rise, those are the ones who grow. That night, I went home, opened my notebook again, and read the red marks one by one. Instead of pain, I tried to see lessons. I said the words aloud slowly, carefully, gently. I repeated them. I listened to my own voice. And for the first time, I didn't hate the sound of my mistakes. I just listened. I learned. If you're listening to me now, maybe you've also fallen. Maybe you've also believed the voice that says, you're not enough. But I want you to know you are. Your mistakes do not define you. They remind you that you are alive, that you are learning, and that you are brave enough to try. When we speak in a new language, we don't just learn words. We learn courage. And courage, my friend, always begins after the fall. Because every journey, even yours, begins with one quiet decision. I will not let this mistake define me. After that night, something inside me began to change quietly. I was still afraid, yes, but I was also curious. How could one small mistake have so much power over me? Why did that single word, confusing, echo so loudly in my head? Fear, I realized, has a voice. And sometimes, that voice speaks louder than our dreams. In English, we often say, face your fears. It means to look directly at the thing that scares you. But fear doesn't always stand in front of you like a monster. It hides inside your thoughts, in the way you speak to yourself. Every time I opened my notebook, I heard it whisper, you'll make another mistake. Every time I spoke English, it said, people will laugh. Every time I listened to someone fluent, it added, you'll never sound like that. Have you heard that voice before? That small, quiet one that sounds a little bit like you, but colder, sharper, and less kind? It was there every morning when I looked in the mirror. It was there when I wanted to join a conversation. It was even there when I smiled, pretending I was okay. Fear doesn't shout. It whispers in the moments you need courage the most. And it grows stronger when you believe it. One day, I was sitting in a cafe, trying to write in English. The table was small, the coffee was warm, and the rain outside made soft music on the window. I had a pen in my hand, but I couldn't write a single word. My hand shook. My mind was full, not of ideas, but of doubt. That's when I realized something strange. Fear doesn't just stop you from doing something wrong, it also stops you from doing something right. It tells you to wait until you're perfect. Until your accent is perfect. Until your grammar is perfect. Until your life is perfect. But that perfect moment never comes. Because fear keeps moving the finish line. In English, there's a phrase, good enough. It means not perfect, but okay to begin. And that's exactly what we forget when we listen to fear. We forget that good enough is still good. That day in the cafe, I looked around. There were people speaking French, Italian, Chinese, and Spanish all mixed together. Some of them were laughing. Some were making mistakes. But no one cared. No one stopped to correct each other. They just spoke. They communicated. They connected. I watched them and smiled. Maybe that was the real purpose of language, not perfection, but connection. I took a deep breath and wrote one line in my notebook. I will speak even if I am afraid. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't poetic. But it was honest. And in that small act, I took my first step back toward courage. In English, we call this kind of small act a breakthrough. It means the moment you push through something that was holding you back. It doesn't happen in a single big victory. It happens in small decisions, quiet moments, ordinary days. Fear doesn't disappear overnight. It's like a shadow. Even when the sun rises, it follows you. But when you walk toward the light, the shadow always stays behind you. A few days later, I went to class again. My teacher smiled and said, "Would you like to speak first today?" The voice of fear screamed inside my head, "Don't do it." But I remembered the sentence I wrote in my notebook. "I will speak even if I am afraid." So I stood up. My heart beat fast. My palms were sweating. And for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. But then I looked around and saw faces, kind faces, people who were just like me, trying their best. And something inside whispered, "It's okay. Just speak." I began slowly. The first few sentences were broken, full of mistakes. But I didn't stop. I kept going. The words weren't perfect, but they were mine. When I finished, the class clapped softly. Not because I was fluent, but because I was brave. My teacher smiled and said, "That was better. Much better." And I smiled back, this time believing her. That day, I learned a lesson that would change everything. Fear loses its power when you give yourself permission to be imperfect. In English, we often say, "Practice makes perfect." But I think that's not completely true. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes progress. And progress, that's what keeps us alive. That night, I went home feeling lighter. I looked at myself in the mirror and said out loud, "I spoke today. I did it." And for the first time, I didn't hear fear's voice anymore. I heard my own. If you're listening right now, maybe fear still speaks to you. Maybe it tells you that you're not ready. But let me tell you something, no one ever feels ready. You start anyway. You make mistakes anyway. You learn anyway. And that's how you grow. Every word you say in English, every sentence you try to form, is a small victory against fear. Every time you say, "I don't understand," you are still brave. Because you are choosing to learn. Learning a language is not just about grammar or vocabulary. It's about courage, the courage to be seen as imperfect, the courage to sound different, the courage to begin again after you fall. And do you know something magical? Fear's voice begins to fade the moment you start speaking your truth. Because truth is louder than fear. And your story, your voice, your mistakes, they are all part of that truth. So if you ever hear that whisper again, the one that says, "Don't try, remember this moment. Remember this story." And whisper back, "I will speak even if I am afraid." That is the sound of transformation beginning. There comes a moment after fear, when the noise finally fades. When your heart stops racing and the world becomes still again. That's when you meet the hardest person to face yourself. We all have a mirror. Sometimes it's real, hanging on a wall. Sometimes it's invisible, the reflection of how we see ourselves. And when I looked into mine, I didn't see a confident person. I saw someone afraid to fail. Someone who wanted to be perfect, but didn't know how. Someone who had forgotten how to forgive himself. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror and asked, quietly, "Who am I when I make mistakes?" It was such a simple question, but it stayed with me all day. In English, we often use the phrase to see yourself clearly. It means to understand who you are beyond your titles, beyond your goals, beyond your mistakes. But seeing yourself clearly is not easy. Because we often look through the eyes of judgment, not kindness. That day, I looked at my reflection and realized for years I had been talking to myself like an enemy. Every time I made a mistake, I said, "You're stupid." Every time I forgot a word, I said, "You're not good enough." Every time someone else spoke better English, I said, "You'll never be like them." Would you ever say those words to a friend? No. Then why do we say them to ourselves? In that quiet moment, I noticed something. The mirror only shows what is in front of it. It doesn't see your thoughts. It doesn't see your effort. It doesn't see how many times you tried before you got it right. It only reflects what the light touches. Maybe that's why we need to become our own light. I took a small sticky note, wrote one sentence on it, and placed it on the corner of the mirror. It said, "You are learning." That's enough. Not perfect. Not fluent. Just learning. Every morning after that, I looked at that note. At first, I didn't believe it. But slowly, I started to. And that belief changed how I spoke to myself. In English, we sometimes say to give yourself grace. It means to be gentle with yourself, to allow space for mistakes. Because growth doesn't happen when you punish yourself, it happens when you forgive yourself. A few weeks later, I met a classmate named Donna. She was from Spain. She had an accent that danced like music and a laugh that could fill the whole room. But she too was afraid. One day, she told me, "Jason, I don't like speaking English in public. I always make mistakes." I smiled and said, "Me too." We laughed. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Anna told me something I'll never forget. She said, "In my country, we say, mistakes are the proof that you're trying." That sentence stayed in my heart like a warm light. Proof that you're trying. Not proof that you failed. Proof that you dared. In English, there's a similar saying, no mistakes, no progress. And it's true. If you never fall, how will you learn to get back up? That week, Anna and I started practicing together after class. We met in a small park near the river. The air was cool, and the city lights reflected in the water like stars. We sat on a wooden bench with our notebooks, laughing at our strange pronunciation. She would say, "Why English have so many words for one thing?" And I'd reply, "Because English likes to confuse us both." We laughed until our stomachs hurt. But here's the thing, while laughing, we were learning. We were using English not as a wall, but as a bridge. Not to show how good we were, but to connect. That's when I realized something powerful. The mirror I was looking into had been too small. It showed only my mistakes, but not my courage. It showed my accent, but not my effort. It showed my fear, but not my friendship. When you learn a language, you're not just learning grammar. You're learning new ways to see yourself, to express yourself, to forgive yourself. One evening, after practice, Anna said, "You know, Jason, I think we should stop saying, 'I'm bad at English.' We should say, 'I'm still learning.'" And she was right. That one small change in language felt like opening a window. Instead of letting in shame, it let in air, light, and possibility. I went home that night and looked into my mirror again. I saw the same face, tired eyes, messy hair, imperfect pronunciation, but also something new. A quiet strength. A gentle acceptance. In that moment, I whispered, "I am still learning." And for the first time, I believed it completely. In English, we say to turn a corner. It means to begin moving in a new direction after a hard time. And that night, I turned mine. I stopped seeing my reflection as a list of mistakes and started seeing it as a story in progress. If you're listening to this now, maybe you've been standing in front of your own mirror asking, "Why can't I speak perfectly yet?" But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe you should ask instead, "How far have I come?" Look at your own reflection and remember, every word you learned, every sentence you practiced, every mistake you corrected, they are part of your story. Your reflection doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be true. Because in the end, language learning and life itself is not about who you were yesterday, but who you are becoming today. And so, the mirror taught me one simple truth. When you speak kindly to yourself, your voice becomes stronger. And when your voice becomes stronger, fear becomes silent. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening. The kind of day that begins with a sigh and ends with soft rain. I was walking home from class, my backpack heavy with books, my mind heavier with thoughts. Anna had gone home early, and I took the long way back, through the park along the river. The sky was painted with gray clouds, and the city lights reflected on the water like melted gold. The air smelled like rain and fresh bread from the bakery nearby. I remember thinking, maybe I'll never speak English like a native. It wasn't a sad thought, just tired, quiet, and honest. That's when I saw him, an older man sitting on a bench, holding a small notebook. He looked like he had been there for hours, his eyes following the water as if it were telling him stories. I don't know why, but something about him made me stop. Maybe it was the calmness in his posture, or the gentle smile he had even though he was alone. He noticed me looking and said, "Beautiful night, isn't it?" His voice had an accent, soft, slow, careful, the kind of accent that carries history inside it. "Yes," I said, sitting down a few steps away. "It's peaceful." He smiled and nodded. For a few moments, we just sat there in silence, listening to the sound of the river. Then he looked at my books and asked, "Are you a student?" "Yes," I said, "I'm learning English." He smiled again, "So am I." I looked at him, surprised. "You're learning English too?" He laughed softly. "Yes. I started 3 years ago. I was 67. I blinked. 67? He nodded proudly. I always wanted to learn. But for many years, I was afraid. I thought, I'm too old. I'll make too many mistakes. Then one day, I realized I already made many mistakes in life, so why be afraid of new ones? He laughed again, and I couldn't help but laugh with him. His name was Marco. He was from Italy. He had moved to England to be near his daughter and grandchildren. I wanted to speak to them in English, he said. They speak so fast. I wanted to understand their jokes, their stories. As he spoke, his English wasn't perfect. Sometimes he forgot words. Sometimes he stopped mid-sentence to search for the right one. But his eyes spoke fluently. They spoke of patience, of courage, of love. He showed me his notebook. It was full of handwritten sentences, little phrases, small mistakes. On one page, I saw this line written over and over again. "Don't be afraid to sound human." I smiled. "What does that mean?" I asked. Marco looked at me and said, "When we learn a language, we try to sound perfect, like a machine, like the news on television. But language is made by humans, and humans make mistakes. That's what makes us real." His words hit me like a quiet wave. Don't be afraid to sound human. How many times had I stayed silent because I was afraid to sound imperfect? How many moments had I lost because I wanted to sound right? I asked him, "Do you ever feel embarrassed when you make mistakes?" He smiled kindly and said, "Of course. Every day." But then I remember my grandson. When he was learning to speak, he said spaghetti like spaghetti. We all laughed, but with love, never to hurt him. He smiled and tried again. Why can't we give ourselves the same love? I sat there, quiet. The river kept moving. The wind played softly with the leaves. And something in my heart began to loosen, a knot I didn't even know I had been holding. In English, we often say, "It's never too late to learn." But sitting beside Marco, I understood that sentence differently. It's not just about age or time, it's about spirit. It's never too late to be kind to yourself. It's never too late to start again. It's never too late to forgive your mistakes. We talked for almost an hour. He told me stories about his life in Italy, about cooking pasta on Sundays, singing old songs with his wife, and how every time he spoke English wrong, his daughter would laugh and say, "Papa, that's not how we say it." And he would laugh too. "I'm not perfect," he said, "but my daughter understands me." That's enough. Those words stayed with me. That's enough. As we said goodbye, he gave me a small piece of paper torn from his notebook. On it, he had written 3 sentences. Mistakes make meaning. Meaning builds connection. Connection is the real language. He winked and said, "Remember, young man, if you understand this, you already speak the most important language in the world." Then he walked away, slowly, his small umbrella swinging like a rhythm to an old song. I sat there, holding that piece of paper, feeling something inside me shift. Maybe I had been chasing the wrong kind of perfection. Maybe perfection wasn't about grammar or accent, but about honesty. About showing up, about trying, about speaking your truth even when your voice shakes. That night, I went home and placed Marco's paper inside my notebook. It became my bookmark, a reminder that learning English and life itself is not about being flawless. It's about being fearless. In English, we say to see through someone else's eyes. It means to understand a new perspective, to feel the world from another heart. And that night, through Marco's eyes, I saw learning differently. Every mistake was not a wall. It was a doorway. Every wrong word was not failure. It was an invitation to connect, to laugh, to grow. And maybe, just maybe, the best English we speak is the one that comes from a kind heart. That night, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Don't be afraid to sound human." It became a promise, not only for my English, but for my life. Because to sound human is to be real. And to be real is to be free. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, wrapped in blue light. I opened my notebook and saw Marco's paper tucked between the pages, those 3 sentences in his handwriting. Mistakes make meaning. Meaning builds connection. Connection is the real language. I read it aloud, slowly, letting each word land softly in my mind. Something inside me felt lighter, as if I had been carrying a heavy stone, and suddenly I set it down. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and listened to the quiet sound of the city waking up. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid of the day. That morning, I whispered to myself, "Let's try again." At school, I saw Anna standing near the classroom door. She waved, her eyes bright as always. "Hey," she said, "you look different today." I laughed. Maybe I finally slept. But she looked closer and said, "No, it's something else. You look peaceful." I smiled. Maybe I met someone who changed the way I see mistakes. She tilted her head. "A teacher?" I shook mine. "No, a stranger." Anna laughed softly. "Well, sometimes strangers are the best teachers." And she was right. That day, we had to present short speeches in class. The kind of activity that used to fill me with anxiety. When the teacher said, "Who would like to start?" I felt that old fear rise in my chest, but then I remembered Marco's words, "Don't be afraid to sound human." So I raised my hand. Everyone turned to look at me. My heart beat faster. My mouth felt dry. But my voice was ready. I began, "Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk about something I've learned recently, not from a book, but from life." The room fell quiet. Even Anna looked surprised. I continued, "I used to be afraid of mistakes. Every time I spoke English, I wanted to sound perfect. But then I met someone who reminded me that perfection doesn't build connection, courage does." I looked at my classmates, their faces calm and curious. And I said, "When we make mistakes, we show we're learning. When we try again, we show we're growing. And when we keep going, even when it's hard, we show who we really are." There was silence when I finished, then a soft wave of applause. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. Like sunlight after rain. The teacher smiled. "A beautiful message," she said. "And your English has improved so much." I smiled back. "Thank you." I think my fear was heavier than my grammar. The class laughed, but it wasn't the nervous laughter I used to feel. It was warm, easy, real. After class, Anna walked beside me. "That was amazing," she said. "You spoke from your heart." I looked at her and said, "Maybe that's the best way to speak any language." She nodded. Then she said something that stayed with me, "You don't learn English only with your brain. You learn it with your story. Her words were like a mirror reflecting everything Marco had said. Yes, language wasn't just about words. It was about meaning, connection, heart. That evening, I went to the park again, the same place where I met Marco. The bench was empty, the river calm. I sat down and opened my notebook. On the first blank page, I wrote, Day 1, speaking without fear. Then I wrote a small list of new phrases I wanted to practice, but this time, I didn't write them like grammar drills. I wrote them as promises. I can express myself. It's okay to make mistakes. Every word I say brings me closer to others. Fluency grows with kindness. I read them aloud, and for the first time, my voice didn't sound like a test. It sounded alive. The sky began to turn pink. A small breeze touched my face. And I realized this was the same place where I once felt lost. But now it felt like home. In English, there's a phrase, to find your voice. It doesn't only mean speaking louder. It means discovering the courage to speak as yourself. That's what I was learning. Not just English words, but the art of being real in another language. Every time I spoke, I felt a little braver. Every time I made a mistake, I felt a little freer. Because mistakes were no longer proof of failure. They were proof of effort. Proof that I was alive, learning, growing. And maybe, just maybe, that's what fluency truly means. That night, I whispered again, Thank you, Marco. Wherever he was, I hoped he knew his words had found a home in someone else's heart. And I hoped one day my words, imperfect, human, honest, could do the same for someone else. There is something beautiful about rivers. They never move in a straight line. They twist, they turn, they hit stones and drift around them. But still, they keep flowing. Always forward. Always finding a way. One evening, weeks later, I walked by the same river again, the one where I met Marco, the one where Anna and I had laughed about English words, the one that had quietly listened to my fears and hopes. The air was cool, the sky painted in gold and violet, and the city lights danced like tiny reflections of a heartbeat. As I walked, I thought about everything that had changed. My English hadn't become perfect, not yet. But something else had. My relationship with myself. You see, learning a language is not just about remembering vocabulary or grammar. It's about learning how to stay kind to yourself when you forget. It's about learning how to breathe when you're nervous, how to laugh when you make a mistake, how to keep going when your voice shakes. That's what the river taught me. You don't need to flow perfectly. You just need to keep flowing. That night, I sat by the riverbank with my notebook. The same one filled with old fears and new hopes. I opened to a fresh page and began to write. English is not just a subject. It's a journey. A river of words that carries me closer to people, closer to the world, and closer to myself. I looked up and smiled. Because for the first time, I understood something deeply simple. I wasn't learning English to sound like someone else. I was learning it to sound like me. When I first began, I used to copy others, their accents, their tone, their rhythm, hoping to sound right. But now I realized the right voice was the one that felt true. In English, there's a phrase, to find your rhythm. It means to move in your own natural pace, to stop forcing and start feeling. That's what happened to me. I found my rhythm, not fast, not perfect, but real. When I spoke, I wasn't afraid of pauses anymore. Because pauses are part of meaning. They give space for your heart to speak. I wasn't afraid of mistakes anymore. Because mistakes are signs of movement, like waves hitting the rocks before they smooth them out. I wasn't afraid of my accent anymore. Because my accent is the sound of my journey, a record of where I come from and how far I've traveled. The river beside me whispered softly, as if agreeing. Its sound was imperfect too, sometimes calm, sometimes rough, but always alive. A few days later, I had my final presentation in class. I stood at the front, took a deep breath, and began my story, this very story. I spoke about mistakes, about fear, about Marco and Anna, about how a stranger by the river taught me more than a grammar book ever could. My voice was calm. My sentences weren't perfect, but they were real. And when I finished, there was silence, the kind of silence that feels like understanding. Then my teacher said softly, "Your English is beautiful, Jason, not because it's perfect, but because it's alive." I smiled, because that was exactly what I wanted it to be. Later that day, I walked home through the quiet streets, the sun melting behind the rooftops. I passed small cafes where people were laughing in many different languages. And I realized every language has its own music. Every mistake, its own rhythm. Every voice, its own beauty. And maybe English, this river of words, is not meant to be mastered like a test, but lived like a story. When I reached my apartment, I looked at the mirror again. The small note was still there. "You're learning." That's enough. But this time, I added a new line beneath it. "And your mistakes are part of your music." I smiled at my reflection. It smiled back, not perfectly, but truthfully. If you're listening to this now, maybe you're on your own journey too. Maybe you've been afraid of making mistakes, or tired of repeating the same lessons, or frustrated because you don't sound the way you wish you could. But let me tell you this, you're flowing. You're learning. You're growing. And that is more than enough. Every time you try to speak, you're brave. Every time you make a mistake, you're learning. Every time you keep going, you're becoming fluent, not just in English, but in life. Soft piano fades, leaving only the sound of the river, calm, endless. As the water moved gently under the moonlight, I whispered to myself, "Your mistakes don't define you. Your courage does." And then, quietly, I closed my notebook, took one deep breath, and walked on, following the river, following the rhythm, following my story. Sometimes, when I look back, I wonder, was it really about English? Or was it about learning to be kind to myself? Because now I see, language learning is not just about words, or grammar, or pronunciation. It's about emotion. It's about patience. It's about courage, the quiet kind, the one that says, "I will try again tomorrow." We often think fluency means speaking fast. But true fluency is speaking freely. Not with fear, but with trust. Trust in your thoughts. Trust in your journey. Trust that even when your words are imperfect, your message still matters. When I first began learning, I thought my mistakes were heavy stones, something to hide, something to be ashamed of. But now I know they were stepping stones. They helped me cross from fear to freedom. Maybe you're standing on your own stones right now. Maybe you're thinking, "I can't say this right." But what if that mistake is not blocking your path? What if it is your path? Every language is built on mistakes. Every fluent speaker once said something wrong, once forgot a word, once laughed at their own pronunciation. And that's how they grew. That's how you'll grow too. In English, we often say to learn from experience. But I think the real phrase should be to grow through experience. Because learning a language changes not only your vocabulary, it changes your heart. You start noticing beauty in small things, the way people greet each other, the rhythm of different voices, the courage it takes to be understood. You begin to see that communication is not about perfection. It's about connection. And that connection, that moment when two people understand each other, is the most powerful thing in the world. Now, when I meet new learners, I tell them the same thing Marco once told me. Don't be afraid to sound human. Because that is the most beautiful sound you can make, your real voice, full of effort, emotion, and life. When you say a sentence and it comes out a little broken, don't hide. Smile. You are doing something incredible. You are building a bridge between hearts using words that weren't even yours when you were born. That's not a small thing. That's art. That's courage. Music softens slow, reflective piano notes echo like a heartbeat. So now, as this journey ends, I want you to take a deep breath with me. Inhale, and remember, you're learning. Exhale, and remember, that's enough. Because every day you listen, every day you speak, every day you try again, you are writing your own story. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the person who once said, "I can't do this," is the same person who now helps others do the same. Before I close, I want to leave you with a few small reflections, simple English thoughts to guide your journey. When you forget a word, say to yourself, "It's okay. My heart remembers what my tongue forgets." When you make a mistake, whisper, "This is proof that I'm trying." When you feel nervous, remind yourself, everyone was a beginner once, even the fluent ones. And when you finally speak, don't try to sound perfect. Just sound present. Speak with a voice that is yours, the one shaped by your story, your accent, your courage. As I stand by the river one last time, watching the water flow under the stars, I whisper to myself, your mistakes don't define you. Your effort does. Your fear doesn't define you. Your courage does. Your English doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest. And then, with a quiet smile, I close my notebook, take one step forward, and keep walking, just like the river, always learning, always flowing, always free. Thank you for listening to Fluent English Journey. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you that English is not a race, it's a rhythm. Keep walking. Keep speaking. And remember, your mistakes are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your fluency. Now, take a deep breath. You've come a long way. You've listened, you've imagined, you've felt every word. This last moment is not about listening anymore. It's about speaking, about hearing your own voice, and knowing that it matters. So, wherever you are right now, sitting, walking, lying down, just relax your shoulders. Let your breath slow down. And repeat after me. Not perfectly, just honestly. I am learning. I am growing. I am not my mistakes. My mistakes are my teachers. Every word I speak brings me closer to fluency. Every mistake brings me closer to understanding. I am not afraid to sound human. I am proud to be learning this language. I am building confidence, one word at a time. I can express myself clearly and calmly. My English doesn't need to be perfect, it needs to be real. Soft instrumental echo, piano, and light strings. Now, repeat these thoughts with emotion, as if you're talking to yourself in the mirror. Just like I once did. I forgive my mistakes. I welcome my progress. I believe in my voice. I belong in every conversation. I am brave enough to speak. I am strong enough to continue. I am learning English. And I am learning myself. Now, take one more deep breath. You're not just repeating words. You're training your mind to think in kindness, to speak with calm confidence. That's what true fluency feels like. It's not just about grammar. It's about peace. It's about presence. It's about being here. With your words, your story, your heart. When you finish this session, don't rush to another lesson. Take a moment to simply be. Maybe write one short line in your notebook. Something like, "Today, I spoke with courage." Or, "Today, I practiced not perfection, but peace." Because every time you honor your progress, your English grows quietly. Like a seed that blooms without noise. Music grows warmer, golden, like sunrise. So, before we end, repeat with me one last time. Slowly, softly, truthfully. My mistakes don't define me. My courage defines me. My fear doesn't limit me. My effort empowers me. I am becoming fluent in English and in life. Now smile. Because you've done something powerful. You've not only listened in English. You've felt in English. You've spoken with honesty. And that is the purest form of fluency. Whenever you doubt yourself again, remember this sound, this calmness, this connection. Remember that language is not about being perfect. It's about being present. Thank you for walking this journey with me, for listening, for speaking, for feeling. I'll see you again on another quiet evening, in another story, on this Fluent English journey.